Welcome back to Beyond the Unknown, the podcast. The show that takes you deeper into the stories that matter. I'm Alex Carter.
And I'm Olivia Reyes.
Olivia, we've covered some pretty wild topics on this show. UFOs, the evolution of AI, even those upcoming congressional hearings on extraterrestrial encounters. But today's episode is hitting us on a different level, a deeply personal one.
Yeah, it really is, Alex. It's a story that's resonating with so many people right now. We're talking about episode 11, Justice for Peanut.
Peanut, the pet squirrel who captured the hearts of over 500,000 people on social media. A report we came across detailed his life, his tragic death, and the outcry that followed. And honestly, when we first read it, we were both, I was shaken. It felt like something had gone terribly wrong.
I completely agree. This isn't just about a squirrel. It's about our relationship with animals, the laws that govern that relationship, and the power of social media to shine a light on injustice.
Okay, so let's unpack this. Starting with Peanut's story. He was orphaned back in 2017 after his mother was hit by a car in New York City. The report says that Mark and Daniela Longo rescued him, realizing he wouldn't survive on his own.
And that act of kindness sparked something incredible. Saving Peanut led the Longos to establish Peanut's Freedom Farm Animal Sanctuary in Pine City, New York. They now care for over 250 rescued animals.
So Peanut's story is actually the origin story of an entire animal sanctuary. That's amazing.
It really is. But Peanut wasn't just a resident at the sanctuary. He became a social media star. His adorable antics, particularly on Instagram, drew in over 625,000 followers.
That's a huge following. We'd be thrilled with a fraction of that. Why do you think Peanut resonated with so many people?
I think it's that classic underdog story, this tiny creature rescued from tragedy, finding a loving home and bringing joy to everyone who followed him online. People connected with that.
And it probably helped raise awareness for the Longos mission at the sanctuary, too. Who doesn't love a heartwarming animal story?
Yeah. Absolutely. Peanut's fame put a spotlight on the amazing work they were doing. But then, everything changed.
On October 31st of this year, the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation, the DEC, raided the sanctuary.
The report says it stemmed from complaints about unlawfully keeping wildlife and concerns over rabies.
Wait, so they raided an animal sanctuary because of a squirrel? That seems extreme.
It does, doesn't it? But the DEC seized Peanut and a raccoon named Fred during the raid.
Okay, so what happened next? What was the outcome of the raid?
This is where it gets truly heartbreaking. The report states that both Peanut and Fred were euthanized the very next day to test for rabies.
Hold on. They were euthanized, but Peanut was essentially a domesticated pet.
That's where the conflict lies, Alex. New York state law prohibits owning wild animals like squirrels as pets without specific permits.
So even though Peanut had been living with the Longos for years, the DEC was bound by these regulations.
According to the report, that's their justification. They were following the letter of the law.
But surely there must be some flexibility in these situations.
Right. Peanut was clearly not a wild animal running loose in the streets. He was a beloved pet who had regular vet checkups.
You would think so, wouldn't you? But critics of the DEC's actions are saying the law doesn't account for situations like Peanut's, where a wild animal has essentially been domesticated and poses no threat.
It just seems so senseless, especially considering the rabies concern. While I understand rabies is a serious disease, was euthanizing Peanut really the only option?
Rabies is indeed a fatal disease. And according to the report, New York has incredibly strict protocols for any potential exposure.
Meaning?
Euthanasia. The tests for rabies require an examination of brain tissue. So even if Peanut had been quarantined and observed, the outcome likely would have been the same.
But couldn't they have at least tried quarantine? Observed him for any signs of illness?
Many people are arguing that they should have, especially given that Peanut wasn't aggressive and had been living with humans for so long. It raises questions about whether a rigid application of the law failed to consider the unique bond between Peanut and the Longos.
It really makes you wonder if the regulations are truly serving their purpose. Are they actually protecting public health, or are they just causing unnecessary heartbreak in cases like this?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
And it wasn't just the Longos who were heartbroken. The public outcry following Peanut's death was enormous. Social media exploded. Hashtags like Justice for Peanut and Save Peanut were trending everywhere.
The report highlighted the involvement of some pretty big names, too. Even Elon Musk chimed in, suggesting there might have been more humane options.
Wow, even Elon Musk. That's saying something. What else was happening online besides the trending hashtags?
Petitions were circulating, demanding an investigation into the DEC's actions. Fundraising efforts were launched to support the Longos and potentially challenge the current regulations in court. It was a massive outpouring of grief and anger.
It's incredible how social media can amplify these stories
Mhm.
and bring them to a global audience, igniting a movement almost instantly.
It really does show the power of social media to hold institutions accountable and demand justice, even for a tiny squirrel.
Okay, so we've covered the basics of Peanut's story, the raid, and the public reaction. What does it all mean? What are the key takeaways here, Olivia?
I think Peanut's case raises some fundamental questions about how we as a society view and treat animals. Do our current laws actually protect them? Do they allow for flexibility and compassion in cases like this where a wild animal has become a beloved member of a family?
And what about the DEC's actions? Were they simply following protocol, or was there a lack of common sense and compassion involved?
Those are questions that deserve serious consideration. Peanut's story has sparked a much-needed conversation about the complexities of human-animal relationships and whether our legal framework adequately reflects those complexities.
It's a difficult conversation to have, but one that we can't shy away from.
Absolutely, and I think it's a conversation that needs to involve a variety of perspectives: animal welfare experts, legal professionals, veterinarians, and of course, the public. We need to work together to find solutions that protect both public safety and animal well-being.
Well said. We'll be back in a moment to dive deeper into the legal framework surrounding this case, explore the specific regulations governing wild animals in New York, and discuss some of the proposed solutions that are being debated right now. Stay with us.
Welcome back to Beyond the Unknown. We've been unpacking the truly heartbreaking case of Peanut, the pet squirrel who was euthanized following a raid on his sanctuary home.
This story has really struck a chord with our listeners and with us as well.
Yeah.
There's a feeling that something went terribly wrong here, and it's prompting a lot of important questions about how we handle situations involving domesticated wildlife.
Absolutely. And as we delve deeper into this, it becomes clear that there are some significant gaps in our legal framework that need to be addressed.
Okay, so let's break down the legal specifics. What does the law in New York actually say about owning wild animals like squirrels? What does the report tell us about that?
Well, as we touched on earlier, New York state law explicitly prohibits owning wild animals as pets without proper permits. And even obtaining those permits is extremely difficult, if not impossible in many cases.
So there's really no gray area, no exceptions for animals like Peanut who have been raised in a human home and pose no threat.
Yeah, the regulations, as they stand now, appear to be very black and white, especially when it comes to animals considered rabies vectors.
Rabies vectors.
Right. The report explains that rabies vectors are animals that are more likely to carry and transmit the disease. Squirrels and raccoons, unfortunately, fall into this category.
So because of this classification, the DEC had no choice but to follow the strict rabies protocols, even though Peanut was essentially a domesticated vet.
That's how they're defending their actions, yes. They claim their hands were tied due to the potential risk to public health.
But the fact that Peanut had been living with the Longos for 7 years, had regular vet checkups, and displayed no signs of aggression, none of that was taken into consideration.
That's the main point of contention for a lot of people. Critics of the DEC argue that the current law needs to be more flexible to accommodate situations like Peanut's. They say it's unreasonable to apply the same standards to a truly wild animal and one that has been domesticated and integrated into a human family.
This case really highlights the disconnect between the letter of the law and the reality of how humans interact with animals in these unique circumstances.
Exactly. And that disconnect is fueling a lot of the public anger and calls for reform. People are recognizing that a one-size-fits-all approach isn't working when it comes to domesticated wildlife.
So what are some of the solutions being proposed? How can we address these gaps in the system and prevent similar tragedies from happening in the future? What does the report say about this?
One of the most prominent ideas is to create a specific legal category for domesticated wildlife.
So basically acknowledging that these animals exist and that they shouldn't be treated the same way as their wild counterparts.
Precisely. The report suggests this new category could come with its own set of guidelines and protocols that are more appropriate for animals like Peanut. It would recognize that they pose a lower risk to public health and that their well-being, as well as their bond with their human families, should be taken into account.
That makes a lot of sense. It would allow for a more nuanced and compassionate approach to these situations. What else is being discussed?
The report also highlights the need for better education and awareness, both for the public and for law enforcement.
You mean people need to be more informed about the laws regarding wild animals and the DEC needs more training on how to handle cases involving domesticated wildlife.
Exactly. There seems to have been a breakdown in communication in Peanut's case. If the people who filed the complaints had understood that Peanut was essentially a pet, or if the DEC officers had been trained to recognize the difference between a domesticated animal and a truly wild one, perhaps things could have gone differently.
It's almost like a cultural shift is needed, not just a legal one. We need to change the way we think about our relationship with these animals and recognize that there's a spectrum, not just a hard line between wild and domesticated.
I think you're right, and part of that shift involves recognizing the value of the human-animal bond, even when it comes to animals we might not traditionally consider as companions.
I keep coming back to the fact that Peanut was euthanized because of the rabies protocols. Is there any progress being made in developing alternative testing methods that don't require euthanasia?
That's a great question, Alex, and one that's at the forefront of many discussions right now. And thankfully, the report highlights some promising advancements in this area. Scientists are actually working on developing non-lethal rabies tests that could analyze saliva or blood samples rather than brain tissue.
Wow, that would be a game changer. It would eliminate the need for euthanasia in cases like Peanut's and provide a more humane approach to rabies prevention.
It would indeed. And while these tests are still in the research and development phase, the fact that they're being pursued gives me hope for the future. It shows that people are recognizing the need for more compassionate and ethical solutions.
It's encouraging to hear that progress is being made. So even though changing the law takes time, these new testing methods could have an immediate impact.
Absolutely. They could be a crucial bridge between the current regulations and the more nuanced legal framework that many people are advocating for.
This entire conversation has been incredibly thought-provoking, and I have to admit, it's been a bit emotionally draining as well. Peanut's story is a harsh reminder of the complexities of our relationship with the natural world.
I agree. It's a reminder that our laws and policies need to evolve to reflect the realities of that relationship, especially as we learn more about animal intelligence, emotions, and their capacity to form deep bonds with humans.
This brings us to another important aspect of this story, the role of social media in amplifying these issues and driving calls for change. What are your thoughts on this, Olivia?
Well, as we've seen with Peanut's case, social media can be an incredibly powerful tool for raising awareness and mobilizing people around a cause. It has the ability to connect people from all over the world who share a common concern and give them a platform to voice their outrage and demand justice.
And in this case, it brought international attention to an issue that might have otherwise gone unnoticed. Do you think this kind of public pressure can actually lead to meaningful change?
I absolutely believe it can. We've seen it happen time and time again with various social and political movements. When enough people come together and demand change, lawmakers and institutions are forced to listen.
And in Peanut's case, that pressure is already starting to yield results. Lawmakers in New York are facing mounting pressure to re-examine the state's regulations on domesticated wildlife and consider more humane and flexible approaches.
It's a testament to the power of collective action and the growing recognition that our laws need to keep pace with our evolving understanding of animals and our relationship with them.
I think this case also highlights the importance of sanctuaries, like the one the Longos created. They provide a safe haven for animals in need and often act as a bridge between humans and the natural world.
That's such a good point, Alex. And in the next part of our deep dive, we'll explore the incredible work being done by sanctuaries around the world. We'll hear from experts on the front lines of animal welfare and discuss what we as individuals can do to help create a more just and compassionate world for all living creatures.
We'll be back after a brief pause to delve into those inspiring stories and explore what the future might hold for domesticated wildlife. Stay with us. Welcome back to Beyond the Unknown. We've been deep diving into the emotionally charged case of Peanut, the domesticated squirrel who was tragically euthanized, sparking a national debate about our relationship with animals and the laws that govern that relationship.
It's a conversation that's far from over, but amidst the sadness and outrage, there's a glimmer of hope in the incredible work being done by animal sanctuaries and rescue organizations around the world.
You're right. And those are the stories we want to focus on in this final part of our deep dive. The people who are dedicating their lives to bridging the gap between humans and wildlife, advocating for more compassionate policies, and creating a world where stories like Peanut's become less common.
Yeah. These sanctuaries are more than just shelters. They're havens for animals who've been injured, orphaned, or displaced, often due to human actions. They provide a safe space for these animals to heal, to recover, and, in some cases, reintegrate back into the wild.
And they play a vital role in educating the public, right?
Yeah.
Helping people understand these animals, their needs, and the challenges they face in a world increasingly dominated by humans.
Absolutely. The report we've been referencing highlights several sanctuaries that are doing incredible work in this area. They offer tours, educational programs, and even hands-on experiences that allow people to connect with animals on a deeper level. It's about fostering empathy, breaking down stereotypes, and showing people that these animals are more than just wild creatures. They're individuals with their own unique personalities and stories.
I can only imagine how powerful those experiences must be, especially for children. It could completely change their perspective on animals and inspire them to become advocates for animal welfare.
That's the idea. To cultivate a sense of responsibility and compassion for the natural world from a young age. And some sanctuaries are even taking it a step further, working with researchers and conservationists to study animal behavior, develop more effective rehabilitation techniques, and contribute to broader conservation efforts.
It's amazing to hear about all the different ways these sanctuaries are making a difference. It feels like they're on the front lines of a movement, pushing for a more harmonious coexistence between humans and animals.
They really are. And their work is more important now than ever before as habitat loss, climate change, and human encroachment continue to threaten wildlife populations around the globe. These sanctuaries are often the last line of defense for many species, providing a refuge from a world that's becoming increasingly hostile.
Okay, so for our listeners who are feeling inspired to get involved, what can they do to support these sanctuaries and their mission?
There are so many ways to make a difference. First and foremost, find a local sanctuary or rescue organization in your area and reach out. Many of them rely heavily on volunteers, and even a few hours of your time can have a significant impact.
And for those who aren't able to volunteer, donations are always appreciated, right?
Absolutely. Even a small financial contribution can go a long way in helping these organizations provide food, shelter, and medical care for the animals in their care.
And don't forget about the power of education and advocacy. Sharing these stories, talking to friends and family, and contacting your elected officials can help raise awareness and push for more humane and effective policies for wildlife protection.
Exactly. Every voice counts in this fight, and the more people who speak up for animals, the louder that collective voice becomes.
It's encouraging to see how much passion and dedication there is out there for animal welfare. Even in the face of tragedies like Peanuts, there are so many people working tirelessly to create a better world for animals.
It's a testament to the strength of the human spirit, our capacity for compassion, and our unwavering belief that even in the darkest of times, hope remains.
Well said. And that brings us to the end of our deep dive into the story of Peanut. It's been a journey filled with heartbreak, anger, but also with a sense of possibility and hope.
I agree. And while Peanut's story is a stark reminder of the challenges we face, it also serves as a powerful call to action. We can all make a difference in our own way, whether it's by supporting sanctuaries, advocating for change, or simply being more mindful of our impact on the natural world.
Thank you for joining us on this exploration. We hope this episode has left you with a renewed sense of purpose and a commitment to creating a world where all creatures, great and small, are treated with compassion, dignity, and respect.
Until next time, keep exploring beyond the unknown.